For me, clay sort of became my gateway to a different life. I had this hardened lawyer scaffolding that I had built up to survive in the corporate world. And then slowly, with clay, this sort of hardened lawyer scaffolding started dismantling. A pot actually has that power. It has something that is supernatural, something that comes from another realm, that I think the artist is the facilitator that creates this object. The clay has decided what it wants to be even before it comes to my hands.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to join this candid spiritual community to hear more conversations that will help you become happier, healthier, and more healed. All I want you to do is click on that subscribe button because I love your support. I love seeing all the comments pouring through, all the love pouring through, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you, whether you're a spiritual seeker or you're just curious about the topic. And we really hope that our conversations will provide you food for thought and inspiration for your own spiritual journey. So join us for honest, candid discussions about spirituality for soul's sake.
For soul's sake. For soul's sake.
Today, we're sat with a potter. Not Harry Potter, someone who has built an empire in my eyes of people who are molding spiritual consciousness through clay. Her name is Stine Dulong. She has an incredible wealth of experience with clay, and today we're going to talk about her journey from corporate lawyer all the way through to spiritualist and everything in between. I want to welcome you here. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's kind of weird because we're friends already, so we don't have to do all the niceties of people that I don't know. So I really appreciate it. As a friend to friend, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
What do we want to talk about? Where do we go? Should we talk about corporate life and changing from that to being clay master? I don't know whether that's the right word, but
Yes, we can talk about corporate life.
let's talk about it.
I guess maybe the main point about corporate life is that I wanted out, and that I probably always, ever since leaving law school, had a feeling that it just wasn't right for me. And outwardly, of course, I was having success. I was doing all the things the society tells you.
You're making money,
I was making money.
status.
I was working in a high-flying city job as a lawyer, flying to the US.
So you're already a boss lady at that point.
Absolutely. But this is the interesting thing, because I think inwardly it felt like I was suffocating, and I could feel my soul or something inside of me like slowly just being subdued minute by minute, like the longer I was in that profession. And it sort of was cruising up the escalators every single morning at Chancery Lane, and it literally felt like life was closing in on me.
Wow.
And so I think I had this small voice inside always that was like, this just can't be it. But of course you feel a bit like you're crazy because society tells you, well, you have it, you have everything. And then yet you just think, well, this doesn't feel like it.
Do you have we have a lot of guests on here that have given up life in corporate circumstances and gone into the world of wellness, yoga, meditation, and in your case, in the world of pottery. Do you think it's still possible to be happy in suit and tie?
Completely honestly?
Yeah.
No,
Really?
I don't think so.
I mean, what if someone's watching this and they're on their way to their work, their corporate job? Do you think they should just turn around and go the other way?
Sorry, the truth hurts.
Straight? Okay.
Yeah, no, I actually don't think. I think it's very, very hard
It's hard.
to operate within a system that has been designed for profit. Because actually that system doesn't have the human being at its center.
Wow.
And so how could we thrive in that, actually?
Yeah.
And it's also a system that profits from none of us being happy, because wrinkle creams don't sell if you're happy. And it's sort of, actually the whole system would collapse if we were all just content and happy with who we are, because we wouldn't buy things and we wouldn't sort of adhere to or strive for the next and the better and the bigger, because actually we'd be content with what is.
How do we bring it down then? How do we bring down the whole structure? Because, I mean, I kind of pretty much agree with you.
Keep doing your kirtan, Radhika.
I'll keep doing it. But what if someone doesn't like kirtan? This is where the world of pottery comes in, because I think it's so beautiful that there are change makers in every facet of life, even in the corporate world. Like, if you're going to be a corporate shark, then try your best to be a conscious corporate shark. Like add in what you can with the facility that you've been given. Like we just did a kirtan at HSBC just before I went to India.
Yeah.
And I walked into the building, I was like, this is not my scene. I walked away from this a long time ago, don't want anything to do with it. But when we sat down to share kirtan with these people, I felt they need this also, that there needs to be an element of this somewhere here as well. So, I mean, I guess the question is more along the lines of how did you make clay conscious? Like what was okay, you went through this life of, I read your bio, you went through this life of corporate life, giving that up, traumatic circumstances, the churning of that towards creating a pottery studio. But what my question is here is around how to make that clay conscious and how to make people's experience of that clay more conscious and life meanings, etc.
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think, first of all, I didn't make clay conscious. It just is. And I think clay is alive. And I think that it has a magic to it that it works with anybody who works with it. So that's the first thing. And then I would say, secondly, for me, clay sort of became my gateway to a different life. And it became the first time in my life that I could sit still with myself and I could be with who I was. And I had tried yoga and I had tried meditation, but I was like, at the time, this is about 10 years ago, I was a classic sort of traumatized lawyer who was like, oh, yoga is for like bendy, skinny girls that drink kale, and I'm just not into it. It's not for me. Yeah. I now do yoga asanas every day. So
classic.
Life has changed. But I think, so for me, I had this hardened lawyer scaffolding that I had built up to survive in the corporate world. And then slowly, with clay, working with it in my evening classes, this sort of hardened lawyer scaffolding started dismantling. And often it was painful, actually, to sit with what is. But it was easier that way than it had been with yoga or meditation. Because if you tell somebody who's quite traumatized to sit still and meditate, that's a really unsafe place to be. And I actually don't think it's very helpful either to tell people, just meditate. And so I think with clay, we have this space where it's not really about meditation or about mindfulness, because we're working with clay and we're making a pot.
It's not the obvious mindfulness.
Exactly. And so it's more accessible, I think, for those of us that actually need it the most. So when we talk about our classes, we never sell them as mindfulness classes or clay healing. But that's something that comes as a bonus when you attend classes. I think the person who's behind that offering has that consciousness. It comes through even if it's not in the branding. I agree.
And I think that there's space like for conscious cycling and conscious cooking and conscious all sorts, because I think it depends on the person behind the brand, the intention with which your offering comes across. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I also think when you walk into our studios, people often say, oh, wow, I don't feel like I'm in London. And so I think energetically, you can feel how a space is run. You can feel how the team is treated. Yeah. And what all of us are there. I employ teachers who, like me, want to create healing safe spaces.
Right.
And so I don't really care if they're technically the best potters in the world. Some of them are.
Yeah.
But
Thank
I
God.
care more that they're good human beings wanting to create a safe healing space for our students.
Do you think there's a trade-off, though? Because, like, in one sense, people can comment on the way that I share as well as being very efficient and being quite organized, and the wellness world is kind of like tarnished in one sense because of its, anti-establishment, anti-organization, anti-efficiency models. I'm a big believer, for example, in this quote by Martin Luther King that those who love peace need to live and share as effectively as those who love war. And I wonder if you've experienced that, because I know you personally. I know you're a really sharp person. You're quite a thoughtful person, and you're quite an efficient person. And do you think that takes away from the conscious element?
I think it's a really fine balance. Right. And it's something that in the past I struggled with. I don't struggle with this anymore.
Right.
I think, one, I used to sometimes feel guilty for making money. because that can be a bit of a no-no in the spiritual wellness world, or if you're a company trying to do good. But I've given up on feeling guilt about that, because actually I need the money to provide a safe and working environment for my team, to be able to pay them well, to ensure the survival of my future business and everybody's jobs. And also, if we are profitable, it allows us to run free classes for individuals who've suffered trauma. And so actually it's a necessity that I run it in a good way. So that's the one thing that I've stopped feeling bad about that.
Yeah, it's the knife in the hand of a surgeon versus the knife in the hand of a thief or a killer. The knife is the same.
Exactly, yeah. And I think also it sometimes annoys me a bit that we have this idea that, let's say, charities or companies like mine that are small, do-good companies, that they shouldn't be profitable. But it's a fallacy, because actually, why shouldn't a charity, for example, be profitable? Because actually, if I give my money to a charity, I want to know that they are run well. And I don't mind if they have big admin overheads. I could never imagine a company like Apple being run without big admin overheads. And so actually, if it's run well, that's the result. But sort of people don't want to give to charities that have big admin overheads. And it's a very strange way we think about it in society.
Yeah, it's like human nature is such that if you take a bag of grain and you place it in the middle of a town center, the animals will come and they'll eat what they need and then go away. Whereas a human being is naturally going to take the bag and put it in the closet and say, this is for tomorrow. And because of that mentality, we generally don't trust anyone, because we think everyone's got something or the other that they're going to do behind closed doors. But if we just maintain people in a safe way, in a way that, this person's paid according to what they should be paid, then there's no need for people to take things from behind, like in a secretive way. And I've seen it happen, because living and breathing in a corporate job and structure, I saw that when people were paid what they're due, then they don't feel hard done by it and they're going to try and cheat in some way. You never heard of someone trying to con a big corporate or an employee conning their own boss. But you see it all the time happening in smaller charity structures, because people feel that they're undervalued. And so it is definitely a piece, something we need to be conscious about, that just making people feel safe and looked after in a company that's trying to do good means that they're likely going to continually do good and perpetually do that and not feel sour about it. But it is a balance. Oh my God, is it a balance?
It really is, yeah. It also, what you said there about the grain also reminded me of, I can't remember who said it, but that if a monkey takes all the bananas and hoards them, the scientists studying that would look at like, what's the matter with this monkey? That's like, it's sick. Whereas when a human being does it, we put them on the front page of Forbes 100.
Managed to grab all the bananas.
Yeah, but exactly.
Right. Top 10 rich list.
Yeah.
How interesting. When it comes to people who have gone through hard circumstances, like I know that your story involves you living this high flyer lawyer career and then getting into an accident while skiing, which is a very elitist sport.
I know.
Come on, something beautiful. I've never skied, not because of any other reason other than my balance is zero, my physical balance. But going from that to then feeling undervalued at work, and then moving towards thinking, can I change my life because I don't feel happy? Do you feel that it's important that a moment happens for each person in their life where that helps to what helps people to kick into gear is what I'm asking. Like, for you, it was that moment of that ski accident, feeling undervalued in your law firm and then going towards pottery. For me, it was when, again, corporate structure, I felt very unhappy. I felt like I was a number, I didn't feel valued, and I felt like there was a way in which I could serve the world. How can we instigate more of those moments for people without them being traumatic? Or do you think they need to be traumatic for people to make change?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the answer is. For me, I think it had to be traumatic. I often don't learn lessons till I get smacked around the face with them.
Me too, to be honest.
But I also think that things that happen to us, we can choose how we respond to them. We can lie down and be a victim, or we can try to see what the lesson is and grow from whatever happens to us. So I also think it's a lot to do with the mindset, be it big or small events.
The Vedic culture talks about it interestingly. It says that just like the example of someone who's sat by a fire, you could tell the person, don't touch the fire, and you'll get burned, and that person will hear it and go, okay, I've heard it from authoritative testimony, I'm not going to touch it. There's a second type of person who you tell them don't touch the fire, they touch it, they get burned, and they go, I'm not touching that again, right? And they just go, okay, I'm learnt my lesson and that's it. And then the third type of person who just keeps putting their hand in the fire. And being someone who's trying to share spiritual truths with people, I meet that whole range. Like I'll meet someone on the first meeting and I just tell them, take up this practice and it will move you towards the direction of self-realization and love of God, etc. There's some people I tell them, and they keep touching the fire, they keep getting burnt and they can't hear that message in one sense. So I wanted to hear your insight into how to help people that don't yet know how to help themselves, even if you give it to them blatantly. Because you must meet people in your pottery classes.
Yeah. I actually, this might sound a bit harsh, but I think that there's very little you can do for people that don't want to be helped or don't want to change. Because I think we can spend so much of our life trying to rescue people out of situations, but we forget to ask them, are you willing to give up what is making you unhappy or making you sick or making you stuck in this place? And I think very often people are not willing to give up those things. And I think until they are, there isn't actually that much we can do. We can show them the way by example. And I think that's very powerful. So you can give people, you can plant these small seeds of like, there is an alternative. There are other ways of living. There are these, come this way. But the work has to be done by that person themselves.
You can bring the horse to the water, can't make it drink.
Yeah.
You've had an experience also with alcoholism. And I wanted to ask you, did the same thing happen there? Like you had the tools, but what was the transforming point?
Yeah, so I think, I don't consider myself to have been an alcoholic, but I think society has an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I did have a problem with alcohol because I think everybody does. And if you look, for example, in the legal world, very easily you end up drinking every single day because there are networking events or drinks after the case or drinks with colleagues. And so actually I had ended up living a life where almost every single evening I would have alcohol. And I think there's a real alcohol problem actually in a lot of city jobs where the senior management end up being dependent on it and they cope with the stress of the jobs by drinking. And then they encourage the younger employees.
This is the way it's done.
Exactly. And they take them out for drinks and facilitate their drinking by paying for it. And then the cycle repeats. And nobody questions it because everybody's legitimizing each other's excessive drinking. But I think for me, as I started working with clay and I started slowing down and I started being with myself, and also when I had the skiing accident that sort of forced me to take time off work, I was suddenly lying at home sort of going, actually, what am I doing with my life? Like, how is it that I'm living? So I think stopping alcohol was almost like a natural, I had to do it to become present and to stop numbing and to stop running away. Then the running away and the numbing wasn't just alcohol. It was also overworking. It was shopping. It was relationships. It was everything. It's like the capitalist model also encourages this cycle of addiction, actually. So yeah, what was the question?
I don't know. Does it matter?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
That was my answer.
Yeah. I mean, during this Christmas time, New Year, Christmas time, this is the time where people are almost forced down that line of perpetuating a behavior that they know someone internally doesn't serve them. And I think that a message for each person that's watching this that is kind of anxious, well, I don't know when this episode's airing, but if it's after Christmas and you felt like, well, I just felt like I did the same thing that I do after work anyway, maybe book in a holiday or book in a time where you can walk away from all of that. Like make I don't even know if you call it a vow or you make a firm affirmation. There you go, an affirmation where you go, I'm just not going to drink coffee for the next 10 days and that's going to be my holiday. I'm going to eat clean, live clean, think about the direction in which my life is going. Just like how an artist before a painting, regularly has to step away from the work to go, what does this look like? What does this feel like? Is this what I want it to look like at the end? I think that each person needs to, in some way, I hope it's, when I talk about the fire example, I hope it's not too dramatic, but a holiday can even do that, where you can just step away and just go, what is my life doing right now? What direction is it going in? I want to talk about, because you've already shared so many beautiful lessons from clay, I want to talk about some lessons that you've taken away from, working with clay. What's one of the biggest lessons, or some of the biggest lessons that you feel have really helped your life? And I hope in sharing that, hopefully people are more encouraged to go, I'm going to come and join the class with Stine.
Yeah. Can I just maybe add to our
Please,
discussions about alcohol? I also think for me, what has been key in staying, so it's been 6 years actually since I stopped drinking
Congrats.
alcohol. Thanks. And I think one of the key parts to that for me was also about finding communities where the being together didn't center around drinking, because living in the UK, it's actually very difficult to find anything social to do that isn't centered around alcohol. Yeah. And of course, your kirtans for me were heaven sent when I found them. That's like in that community, it's never about alcohol when we hang out, all of us. And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Because also the connections you make and the friendships you have, they are much more deep rooted, and they don't sort of depend on an external substance.
It's an internal substance.
Yeah. Well, other than Krishna, maybe.
Yeah. That chap, Krishna. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that we'll definitely get into lessons about clay, but more communities need to exist. Like, I'm fully conscious that kirtan might not appeal to everybody. It may not be for everyone. And especially if you're a kirtan lover and you're watching this and you're thinking, what are you talking about? Like, this is the practice of the age, this is what everyone should be doing. I get it, but like, some people just aren't ready for it. And some people aren't looking for it. They don't have a desire for it. Spiritual communities kind of like start with what you can immediately, like clay for me is such a great example, because I feel like people can access it much easier than chanting mantras and so I think that turn to hobbies that you already cherish and find communities around that hobby that don't revolve around alcohol, that don't revolve around using each other. It is possible. There's enough communities out there that are like that. It's just a case of just going, let me look on Google and start there.
Yeah,
No?
I agree. Yeah, it does exist.
It does exist. Lessons around clay?
Lessons around clay. I think clay...
Let me break this down, because when I think about it, right, I truly appreciate what you do. But for me, it's like, you made a pot. Tell me, how can you get lessons on making a pot?
Yeah. So I think, actually, on that one, I think sometimes...
it's instigating, I know.
Yeah, no, I think just the way that the way my life has sort of... Actually, I think I have always had quite a different way of looking at life around me. And I'm becoming more and more aware of this as I'm getting older. And for example, I could go to galleries when I was a child, and I could look at a painting or a pot and feel totally in love, like indulged by like this totally overwhelming feeling of just beauty from this object made by an artist. And so I think a pot actually has that power. It has something that is supernatural, something that comes from another realm, that I think the artist is the facilitator that creates this object.
Wow.
But it isn't like, my pots aren't really made by me. The clay has decided what it wants to be even before it comes to my hands, and then it becomes the object. And I think that's why art can make us feel all these like feelings that it can by just going to a gallery or
the potential of what it can become.
But yeah, and of course, I think for me, I have a conversation with the clay when I work with it, because I think it's also quite arrogant to just sit down and think that we can decide what this clay needs to be. I mean, clay has evolved over centuries and thousands and thousands of years, and then we dig it out of the ground, and then
decide what we think it should be.
Yeah, but the clay has its own mind.
Oh, this is super deep, man. So many lessons you can take from it. This is how you treat people. People have also come from the earth, they've come from...
But this is it.
And we always try to make lessons of them, try to make examples of what we think they should be, not loving them for what they are.
Yeah, or allowing them to be what they are, Yeah. So I think maybe one of the biggest lessons in working with clay, and that I see again and again, and which also was my main lesson when I started working with clay, was the letting go of control, because you can't control every single step of the ceramic process. There are so many things that can go wrong and where it doesn't quite become exactly how you wanted it to be. And I think particularly as a lawyer back in the day, I was so used to having so much control of every aspect of my life. And then suddenly here was this clay that was just doing what I wanted it to do. And there was limits to actually the control I had over it. And I think that was such a good lesson for me, that I started loosening this tight grip I had, which then, of course, transformed into other areas of my life where I started letting go, I think, a bit more.
Speaking about letting go of control, you've experienced your fair share of success. You know, making items for Nigella Lawson, being mentioned in Condé Nast, and I mean, it's incredible. The roster goes on, and I mean, it's incredible the work that you've done. Jamie Oliver, if I'm not wrong, and you've got hundreds of students that are coming and flocking their way towards your studios. How do you navigate material success and still remain deeply rooted in what you're speaking about right now, which is like life lessons, which are, let's face it, they're deep. Letting go of control. There's a patience element that you can get from being someone that works with clay, loving people for who they are. I mean, you know, not trying to mold them. So many deep things, but at the same time, it almost feels like a paradox. Like, okay, this is the world of success and this is the world of deep conscious work. And how do you navigate that? Do you have any tools in the toolbox?
So I actually think what happened for me was that there was a point, I'm 10 years into this whole sort of transition now. And I think at some point, maybe 5-6 years in, I noticed that I was posting a little bit less on social media. I wasn't so interested in how many likes I got on my posts. None of it.
Very recently, that means.
Yeah, so well, maybe in the last 3 years or so. And I just noticed that it was like, and I lost interest in actually putting myself out there in the same way. Being
validated by that.
Exactly. And I think that's exactly the point, that I stopped seeking this external validation as much, because what instead I was doing was actually focusing on my spiritual practices, which at the time was a lot of Buddhist meditation and also yoga asanas practice. Of course, now it's transformed into something else. And I've actually only been in Krishna consciousness for the last year and a half. Wow. So it's all happened very fast for me. I was ready.
Wow. Taking up spiritual practice.
And then I think actually quite automatically the desire for all of these other things, it reduces. And I think that it's Ram Dass actually said that as well, that with addiction, he always said, I would never tell somebody to stop doing the substance. I would just tell them to keep meditating.
I mean, it makes complete sense, because people who come to Kirtan, Krishna Bhakti, they get afraid about the fact that they're going to have to let go of things. And my response is always, just add. You know, like some people say, but Radhika, I'm smoking, you know, this, that, and the other. Like, how am I going to experience that? Yeah. My friend, just add. Just don't worry about taking all the things away right now. They will naturally drop. It's the case of the higher taste.
Yeah.
It's like if you tell someone to go to the gym and work out constantly, they're going to get fried out because they're just doing it based on discipline and willing, like, you know, just doing it because they're told by a teacher or something like that. But when they get a taste for it, and when that taste turns into, I think I'm going to do this, like you say, inner resolve, that inner resolve can only come from taste. And so it's like, you know, you can't force someone to drink, I don't know, a nice cup of cocoa. Can't force them, but once they've drunk it, they'll naturally get a taste and go, I think I like this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's the same as spiritual practice. You have to find spiritual practice that gives you taste, which brings about inner resolve, which then brings about transformation because you stick with that practice. You keep digging in this, like, and here's a caveat that I want to mention. I think all too often in the spiritual wellness, whatever we want to call this world, people think it's okay to dig in several different places. Like you take a shovel and you dig 5 meters deep here, 10 meters deep here, 15 meters deep here, 1 meter deep here, 3 meters deep there. If you just dug in the same place, you're going to reach the same water.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, doesn't matter what the practice is in one sense. You just keep digging in the same place, you'll reach the water. And so I think it's important that each and every person, I mean, this would, like, you know, I ask people in the quick fire round, I'm going to ask you too, what one law would you create if you could create one law, something to that effect? And mine would be take up a spiritual practice and keep going. Like, just keep going.
Wow.
You know, because that alone helps to bring good character, to bring about transformation in consciousness, to bring about like a connection with the whatever's out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
I also think for me it's interesting that I was already living my life in many ways according to the principles that I'm now following.
Naturally.
Naturally. And it was because the more I was intuitively just following what felt right, actually the more I was aligning in with that thing you're saying, the source, if you just keep digging deeper, it was almost like then I attuned into that. And so, like you were saying, I used to have a lot of success with, well, I still do with my own ceramics, but actually my focus went away from that, and I started focusing more on teaching, running a good business that would be a nice place for my team to come to work, because now I have the language to say it's because I wanted to be of service. So I'm using my gift, which is ceramics, but to be of service.
that makes me so happy.
And and actually, you know what? It makes me really happy too, because this is the key, is that we think, like, for example, with alcohol, for me, going back to what you were saying, that it's like, oh, I had to give it up and it was so hard. And how I feel about it now is like, why would I ever want to drink again? Like, seriously, why would I?
Way better.
Yeah, exactly, because I have a higher taste, but also I have a purpose that is more important than any of all that other stuff. So
this sounds like a good what's it called? A good feeling story, a good news story. But do you have any regrets as well? Your life seems to be in a really good trajectory.
yeah, I'm not so sure I find regrets very helpful.
Okay.
I like to think of things instead, what did I learn from that?
Wow.
Instead of regretting. I also don't think that things happen as a coincidence, or I think whatever happens, we are meant to go through, and that we're meant to go through it to grow and become better human beings at the end of it. And yes, for sure, there have been some really rough times in my life that I'd rather have been without, but I'm grateful for the lessons. And I think looking at it like that is more helpful than going, oh, I wish I had done that, because actually, what are we going to do with that feeling? Sit and wallow in our self-pity, and actually, I don't want to be in that space. I'd rather look forward and go, how can I change and be better? And
takes a, I guess, a realization of that lesson to be able to speak about it, and to really, you know, like when I'm hearing you, I hear it's not as empty words, but like you have faith, like just look forwards. But I think all too often there are many people that are going to be hearing this, watching it, going, that sounds all well and good, but like I just can't get out of the rut that I'm in right now. Do you have any words of wisdom that you feel would be useful for that person?
yeah,
You can speak directly into the cam.
I think sometimes it's not necessarily that you have to make massive, big life changes. Very, very small changes can be the very beginning of a massive change. And something really simple like drinking a glass of water every single morning when you get up, that can have a massive positive impact on your life. And then maybe in 3 months' time, you add something else every morning, like a little stretch, or which will then help you in your life. And I think we think of change and we think of bettering ourselves as these, like, if we have to go from here to 100 miles an hour. And actually, that's not really how change happens. Change that is worth going through is often very slow, and
patience.
Yeah, and patience with it. And I think, again, it's like this capitalist dream sells us this idea that we can go from from A to B by just paying £1,000, and then you have instant happiness. Yeah. So slow and keep doing your spiritual practice.
Do you have a dream for your life's legacy? Like what you feel you want to be remembered for, or?
I suppose, with the danger of sounding corny, but just that she was a nice human being. It's simple.
Do your family approve your spiritual practices? Approve of your spiritual life, approve of who you are.
I think they find it quite hard to relate to.
Yeah. Mum and dad?
All and my 3 siblings.
3 siblings.
10 nephews and nieces.
10 nephews.
Quite a
Hello.
big family.
Hello, family. Dulong family.
Yeah. I think they find it hard to relate to.
Why?
I suppose they don't have spiritual practices as such. And also, I think I've always been the odd one out in my family, that I've always been quite different in many ways. And I think when you're younger, you feel there's something wrong with you with that. And then, of course, as I've grown older, I've also learned that those very differences is what makes me who I am and makes me capable of doing the things that I am doing.
Do you feel confident when your festive periods come around the corner? I don't know if you're spending any time with the family.
Yeah, no, I'm actually not going home for Christmas
For that
this year,
reason?
so
That you just don't connect with people there, or?
No, I mean, we always, Christmas in my family, we spend together every second year. And so this is just a year where we're not together. Yeah.
But do you dread, I remember distinctly when I first became, I guess, a spiritual lover, that I used to dread going to family dues because the small talk is painful. I just really can't do it anymore. Even now in spiritual communities, when someone asks me about, the things that I feel are non-necessary to talk about, I just kind of shy away and just go into my own little cave and do that. How do you navigate it? Being a spiritualist in the big bad world, or even among your family and loved ones that don't appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually think it's easier for me now to be around family because I'm more sure of who I am and I can rest more in my own being, and I'm quite centered in this is me and what I'm coming with. Whereas I think when I was younger, it was just all very confusing, and it sent me sideways, really, because it was so sort of, who am I? I'm part of this family, but yet I feel different. And it was almost the same. It was all these roles I performed in life, like being a corporate lawyer, where just everything in me was screaming, this is just not right for us. But you perform these roles. But then as you, I suppose, progress on your both spiritual journey and also as you get older, I think you come to a place where this is who I am and that's okay. Yeah. And then you can rest in that instead of sort of getting swept up in the family drama or...
Trying to impress.
Exactly.
Yeah. All too often, I'm actually even though publicly I'm quite outspoken and I have a lot to say in a microphone, but when I'm private, I'm really quiet. And people, even family dudes are like, oh, so how's it going? Pretty good.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Yeah, what do you want to know? It's nice to just be, how I call it, Krishna confident. I'm confident that I'm carried by something greater than myself. I'm confident that my practice is bringing happiness to people and that makes me feel fulfilled. And therefore I don't feel the need to peacock all the time and show off this is who I am, everybody. Look, I'm singing and dancing about it all the time. Yeah. But no, it's okay. I'm happy. I'm quietly, happily Krishna confident.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to that not seeking so much external validation anymore. Point.
I mean, I went through that for sure. And it's not that I'm not going to have to go through that again because that's the nature of life. It's constant change. But sitting here right now, I think, I feel I'm happy to go to any circumstance and be happy to be who I am rather than hide it away. Because I think a lot of spiritual people feel the need to be secretly spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I'm done with secretly being anything.
Really, yeah?
I'm fully out there now. And, and I also think that it's the more you authentically are yourself, actually the more you give other people around you permission to do the same.
Totally.
So it's actually a gift to the world. The people who are managed, I'm not saying I'm always managing to authentically be myself, but I think people who really truly live in authenticity, they are such a gift to the world.
Totally. It's been an incredible conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been just like having a chat with a friend. It is a chat with a friend. So thank you so much for being a friend that I can have a chat with.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to do some quick fire questions. You ready for these?
Yes.
All right. Hold on to your seatbelts, people. It's going to be a good one. What's something you're curious about right now in your life?
Krishna consciousness.
Oh. Do we need to say more? Message her if you want to find out more. All right. What's something you're personally working through at the moment?
The acceptance of life as it is instead of how I wanted it to be.
in short, what legacy would you like to leave behind in this world?
Some beautiful pots.
Beautiful pots. I want to be the owner of a beautiful pot too. Something you used to deeply value but don't value as much anymore.
Approval.
And finally, if you could create one law that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
To be more loving.
To be more loving.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Suppose it looks like being less selfish, doing things for the greater good and the higher good, and doing more of what serves people around you.
Great points. I hope you wrote those down. Really powerful. Stine, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Thank you so much for being a valued member of my community. Thank you so much for all the service that you do to the world that I think really transforms hearts away from the pottery wheel as well as on it. And I'm just deeply grateful for your friendship. Thank you so much for being a friend and a kind person at that. And I hope that this friendship continues for many, many years to come. Thank you.
So do I. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Pleasure's been all mine. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us on this episode for Soul's Sake. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that there were moments that warmed your heart, that gave you hope, that gave you life lessons that perhaps you can implement right now. If you're in a moment of darkness and if you're in a moment of change, New Year is always a chance for people to change the way that they live. And so if this is that moment for you, then I hope that this conversation has been nourishing to give you hope that you might live a life less ordinary and you can be happy doing it. And so thank you so much for joining us on this episode. See you on the next episode of For Soul's Sake. Namaste.
If you love this episode, you'll love my interview with Mimi Icon on mindfulness to manifestation. Check it out.
So I had this panic attack and I thought I was dying. So I go to my teacher and I'm like, I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, I'm so scared. And he's like, well, if you do, we'll call 911. This is back in Toronto. I was living in Toronto at the time. He's like, Mimi, you cannot run away from yourself. It's a panic attack, most likely. Like, now go back into meditation and sit through it and watch it. Any emotional reaction is like a storm. Like, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.